On this episode of the AAF Exchange, back to work, the September and economic fiscal update. Joining us to discuss all this is AAF President Douglas Holtz-Eakin. Doug, thanks for joining us.
It is always a pleasure. Welcome to September.
Yeah, it's been a few weeks for both of us. I mean, vacation season is behind us, and it's now the mad dash to the end of the year.
Do you call that a vacation? Never mind.
Well, you're off traveling the world, and I'm just, the vacation for me was you weren't around, so it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, we'll edit that out.
Anyways, what's been on your mind?
Well, currently I'm enraged by Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent, who took to X, formerly known as Twitter, and made the assertion that it looked like tariff revenues could be $300 billion. And if so, this would raise GDP by 1% and maybe growth as much as 5%. Now, that is by ordinary standards gibberish. And I have tried to decipher what they could possibly mean by this. And there's sort of two things to say about it. Number one, $300 billion is about 10% of imports. Mm-hmm. And so imports are about 10% of GDP, so that's about 1% of GDP. And if you just do the old accounting identity, that GDP is consumption plus investment plus exports minus imports, then reducing M by 1% would raise GDP by 1%. So mm-hmm. That's I guess as close to the logic you can get, except it makes no sense because if you import a T-shirt for $1, that's $1 reduction, and then you consume it for $1, it's $1 in consumption, and because it wasn't produced here, it doesn't contribute to GDP, and that's exactly the answer you should get. So this is just nonsense. I blame Peter Navarro for all of it. He convinced the president of this in his first term, and they've been making the same mistake repeatedly. The other problem with it, and this is a problem that I always have with businessmen who become policymakers, we'll have 5% GDP growth. Okay. Right now, labor force employment's been growing at a little over 0.5%. So since GDP is employees and employee productivity, you need labor productivity of 4.5% growth. Yep. We're not going to have that. And so, it is a disservice to use your position to just foist implausible numbers on people. I mean, he's a powerful administration official. He's the Secretary of the Treasury. Mm-hmm. He's got an army of people who can do the analysis and fact check him. And so don't do this. Mm-hmm. And so I'm enraged by that.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it doesn't pass a lot of tests. I mean, first of all, you're going to it's a tax increase. I mean,
famous for raising GDP growth.
Right, famously good at raising. I mean, I'm not an economics major, but I at least got that point.
Yeah.
And then the second one is, doesn't it hurt their argument? We'll get to IEPA court case in a while, but doesn't that hurt? Jacob pointed this out to me the other day, or I think this morning, basically saying that it harms their court case because their whole court case is about, no, they can do this outside of Congress, but then they're saying it's revenue boosting, which is Congress's purview, and so it seems to be very disjointed in their argument here.
Yes, no one has ever accused the Trump administration of being so principled that it couldn't have any flexibility in explanations. That's not their problem.
All right, let's move on from that, and we'll get back to the IEPA conversation in a second. But Congress is back from its August recess.
Yes.
And there's not only a big to-do list, but there's also a pretty solid feeling of uncertainty going on right now. So let's walk through some of those key issues.
Okay.
You wrote a great dish about this Tuesday. So let's start with the economy. What's the latest here?
Well, if you're trying to figure out where the economy's going, you sort of look at the supply side, especially in the near term. You're going to look at the labor market, and the unemployment rate remains low, but employment growth is very slow, 0.6% annual rate so far this year. That's well down from half of what it was last year. Because they have so slowed the growth of the labor force with the deportations, the unemployment rate has remained low. But there's no real hiring going on. There's no real firing going on. The labor market's just sort of frozen in place. And that we've noticed this before. It's not changed in the past couple of months. As is my habit, I read the USA Today headlines to see what real people are worried about. And the price and layoff issues are increasingly creeping into those headlines. So no big numbers yet, but there's concerns out there. Then you just sort of start looking at the demand side and you say, okay, are people spending money? Are they confident? And the answer on the consumer side is certainly super cautious. Like, consumption growth has just collapsed. Also very close to zero. Goods in particular, the place where you think tariffs would hit the most, 0.3% so far, annual rate. That's really weak. Services are at 0.7. Government spending is supposed to slow down. We're not supposed to be doing a spending binge here. So what does that leave us? Well, investment. And as it turns out, residential investment is just, we all know this, the housing market's in a collapse. Non-residential investment, structures by businesses, weak, negative numbers there as well. But the bright spot on the spending side is business equipment and software, growing at double digits. And that's probably AI, a lot of data centers, a lot of things like that, the servers that go in those data centers. And then also the One Big Beautiful Bill Act doesn't get a lot of attention anymore, but it did have provisions which were backdated to January 1st of this year that allowed firms to expense their purchases of equipment, software, and R&D. And that probably helps some, right? If you're a business doing the math on what's my tax bill and deciding whether to make the investment, well, you're getting a full deduction of it. It matters, and so the cash flow there will help out.
Yeah. How much will Friday's jobs number tell us about? How much will that? What will that tell us about the economy?
It can't stay at stall speed forever.
Yeah.
It goes one of two ways. And so, we're going to look at every data point and say, do you see further weakening? And the concern, of course, is that if you look at things like the purchasing manager surveys, ISM surveys, if you look at the comments in the manufacturing survey this week, one comment described it as worse than the Great Recession. That's not very appealing. And we've seen in other soft indicators concern about the outlook for jobs and this consumer sentiment numbers, things like that. So I think the risk is more to the downside.
Yeah.
And at some point it may crack, and you'll have a bad jobs report.
Yeah, I mean, earlier in the year, I think you said, I think you predicted that we'll probably have a recession in the next
I
few
certainly
quarters.
did think that. We'll come back to the tariffs if you want, but I mean, a big part of that thinking was the tariffs were 100% real and going to happen at the levels they announced. That was, in my view, a guaranteed recession.
Yeah.
It hasn't played out exactly that way. We've seen all these delays and stuff like that, so we'll see now. But I'm worried about the outlook. There's no question about it.
Yeah. All right, we'll put a pin in the tariff talk. But, the Fed takes the center stage in all of this,
Yes.
right, with the economy and what's to come. So what should we expect with that from them?
Well, I think everyone has now gotten the message. They're signaling a cut at the September 16th, 17th meeting. 25 basis points, probably not anything dramatic. They're doing that because the labor market is at a standstill. They have a dual employment and inflation mandate, and so the employment mandates come into play. They're, I think, worried about it softening. That's a legitimate worry. But simultaneously, they have to be worried about not having inflation back to the 2% target. The fact is it's creeping up, not going down. So they're giving up to some extent on that. And it's tough being the Fed, right? You got to pick between the mandates at this point. Looks like they're going to side on the side of lower rates. But, again, at the beginning of the year, I thought, okay, we're likely to have a recession. The Fed's likely to cut 2 times because of the employment mandate. We seem to be on track for roughly that. But we still haven't got inflation down to where we'd like.
Yeah.
Now, for everyone listening, and there should be hundreds of thousands of you, I assume, the thing the Fed is going to be looking at is what do people think of inflation, of the inflation outlook. So they're going to look at expectations. And if people are still expecting 2 years out, 3 years out, 4 years out, inflation's at the 2% target, they're not going to worry about drifting up a little bit. But if when it drifts up, people's expectations drift up, then you got a problem. Because then they're building higher inflation into everything they do.
Yeah. Well, they not only have all those to worry about, but they also have all the politics around them right now to worry about, which I do not envy their position at all.
Yeah.
All right. So how about the Congress? Obviously, has a lot to do. Has a lot in the fiscal and side of things, and then the administration on the regulatory side. So how about fiscal and regulatory policy?
Well, we can do the regulatory policy. I think it's the easiest because we know so little about what's actually going on. I mean, this administration has yet to release a unified agenda, which is just a list of the things they say they're going to do on the regulatory front. So the great deregulators are keeping it secret what they're up to. If you look at what they've actually done, it's precious little, but lots of promises. They have proposed a lot of rules, which, if finalized, would reduce the regulatory burden by hundreds of billions of dollars. So that's a big promise yet to be fulfilled. So that's on the regulatory front, say put TBD and keep checking. On the fiscal front, they're not dealing with any of the big fiscal issues that I worry so much about: the debt, the trajectory of the deficit, the sustainability of Social Security, Medicare. All those are just too big to take on. They're worried about things like funding the government, and it looks to me like they're not going to get there on funding the government. I mean, they're far apart in the House and the Senate. They're way behind schedule in both. And in those circumstances, how do you broker a deal quickly? The White House does it. And this White House has shown no interest in getting a deal and funding the government because it lobbed this $5 billion rescission of foreign aid into the mix. Most people think that that's unlawful. It's certainly against norms. That's not going to help seal a bipartisan deal. It's just not. And so either they will go to a CR or they'll shut it down. Yeah. And I think a shutdown's not unlikely.
I mean, it seems to me that we're in the posturing stage of all this, right? Like, mean, we had, Democrats, like you said, on the Hill basically saying, the rescission, you've already, we want guarantees, and then, which the White House is unwilling to give. And then on the Republicans are already starting to push like, oh, this is going to be the Schumer shutdown again and things like that. So those are kind of the only thing I'm really hearing on the funding debate.
So I think you have that right because, we've been through government shutdowns before. We worry about them a lot. This movie's been seen. But what we do know is that they're not economically damaging. Like, you typically have some shifting in the timing of economic activity gets pushed off till after the government comes back. They always make up their pay. When they do the all-in costs of a government shutdown, it looks like it's a couple of $1 billion in a $30 trillion economy. It just doesn't. It's not much. Yeah. So it's got to be about the politics. Yeah. And who gets blamed for the shutdown? And that's all they're doing right now is laying the predicate for who should get blamed.
Right. On the regulatory front, it's kind of astonishing to me that we haven't done more about this. I mean, I thought coming in, we had the big talk about the 10-to-1. We had the Trump
1 in 10 out.
Yeah, wow. we had the Trump regulatory budgets were going to come back that we saw in the first term that were successful from their point of view. So I mean, it's kind of and of course they're coming in from a Biden administration that set record numbers in regulatory costs. So it should just be easy to I would imagine for them to get off the eraser and start the deregulatory process.
You're singing off my song sheet here. I mean, that's what I thought too. I mean, we've had this conversation. I mean, the one thing that stood out from his first term was the regulatory successes. Same team is back, same techniques. I thought they'd hit the ground running. We'd see a lot more by now. Yeah, but we haven't. And it's a bit baffling, honestly.
Yeah, I told Dan at the beginning of the year he's going to become my favorite guest, and I've barely seen him.
You told him what?
He was going to become my favorite.
Excuse me, Kyle. I'm sitting right here.
My favorite non-Doug guest. This is usually where I do the interlude and ask you a trivia question, but I don't have one prepared this time around, so we'll press on, I suppose.
I guess we probably should finish the podcast. Yeah. Go.
All right, so we'll finish up talking about the Trump tariffs.
Okay.
There was a recent we'll start here. There's a recent court ruling overturning some of them, the IEEPA ones. What happened, and how might this impact tariffs moving forward?
So as we've discussed in the past, there's several flavors of tariffs. There are sectoral tariffs on things like autos and steel and aluminum. There are, quote, Section 301 tariffs against China in particular. We started a case against Brazil. Those are country-specific, and they have a grounding. There's a reason why we have them. And then there are the so-called universal and reciprocal tariffs. These are the across-the-board tariffs the president's been levying on every country, and they were levied under the auspices of the International Economic Emergency Powers Act. He declared an international economic emergency because of the sustained trade deficits that we've run. That was the grounds for the emergency, and used that as the jumping off point for these tariffs. And a court ruled that they got sued, and a court ruled that this exceeded his authorities under IEEPA, the International Economic Powers Act, in particular because IEEPA says that he could regulate international trade, and regulate is not typically confused with taxing or having a tariff. And the court ruled that if Congress had intended for him to levy tariffs, it would have included explicit delegation of tariff powers. And so they said he exceeded his authorities and they got to go. What we got last Friday was the Court of Appeals upheld that. And there was supposed to be some suspense about this. That was me thinking, where the administration might even think about not appealing that decision to the Supreme Court, because they wouldn't want to lose a case like that at the Supreme Court, be a blow to their plans, things like that. But they turn around and quickly ask for the Supreme Court to do an expedited review and come to a decision on it. So that's where they're going. We'll see how that plays out. Either way, my view is that the president has signaled very, very, very clearly now the level of tariffs with which he is comfortable. And if they take them away under IEEPA, he will put them back some other way.
Yeah.
So it is not how much will we get in the way of tariff barriers, it's how will we get there. And it might take him longer to put them up, but I mean, that's where they're going.
Yeah, it seems likely that is the case. But just before we start talking about, what they could look like in the future, what about the things that have already happened in the past? So I'm talking about, what could this mean for the trade agreements already in place, the so-called trade agreements already in place, and what about businesses that already paid those tariffs?
So the administration is claiming all sorts of disasters will befall us if the tariffs are struck down. The trade agreements that have been negotiated relied on the tariffs; they'll fall apart. We'll be a third world nation. Literally, they said that. The United States will never be the same. Blah blah blah. I don't buy any of that. These trade agreements, we've had this conversation before as well, are paper thin. They're often poorly even fleshed out. There are two or three we bothered to write down. The Europeans, because Brussels is notorious nudniks, write everything down, and they did all the work on that. And you have to renegotiate them, maybe. Fine, you have to renegotiate them. I doubt it's even going to be that. These are largely agreements between executives, and they're having no legal standing anyway. The Senate's not ratified them, so I don't view that as a big deal. I mean, these are paper thin. They're paper thin. They'll stay that way. So the money already paid. All the money has been paid by American households and firms. They would have to ask to get it back. They'd have to provide proof of payment, ask for it back, and they could get it back. I can imagine a lot of small businesses wanting their money back, and I would encourage them to get it. I can imagine some pretty high-profile businesses hesitating to ask for their money back and getting on the wrong side of the administration. So that will be interesting. I don't know how each company will come to that.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. So, all right, finally, what about what impact, if any, might this have on the economy or monetary policy going forward?
So the question has always been, okay, we have tariffs at levels not seen in 100 years. They do two things. They are a tax that takes away purchasing power and hurts growth in the economy, and they are a cost which has to be covered and pushes up price levels and has a near-term inflationary impact. How big is that going to be, and when are we going to see it? And all of this pushes off the day when you're sure that those tariffs are there, and so you're sure you have to cover the cost and raise your prices, and people are sure they're not going to have the money for something else, and so they keep spending. So all of this just sort of mutes the impact of those tariffs. It's going to if they're found to be legal, or if they're instituted another way, that impact will happen eventually. But it's all been dragged out and muted, and you haven't seen as much as we thought we would.
Interesting. Well, that's I think a good reset for us as we start September and get ready for Congress and the mad dash to the end of the year.
Yeah.
We'll have to continue watching the CR fights, see if regulations pick up at all, deregulation picks up at all. But Doug, thanks for coming on and breaking that down for us. Before you go, we have to at least mention that football is back.
Yes.
We are both sports fanatics.
Yes, and there are a lot of real potential contenders this year, and they're the Patriots.
I knew you were going to find a way to get that jab in there. But I can't wait to see the 500 Steelers yet again.
Oh, wait. No, the highlight, let's face it, we're going to get to see the Steelers and the Jets open the season having traded...
That's true.
Having traded terrible quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Well, I'm excited that just football's back in general, and I have some outlet other than... working here in politics to make me angry.
Yeah, but we were reminded by North Carolina TCU that not all games are football.
Yes, that was a welcome to college football kind of moment for Bill Belichick.
UNC has not lost a non-conference game by that much since he was in middle school.
That's a long time.
Ouch.
It's a long time. All right, Doug, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.